about 1 or 2 minutes away.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today will mark a turning point on our warrant and entry policies here in Minneapolis. Following the killing of Amir Locke, we wanted to make sure we got this new policy right. And we've engaged with a number of different stakeholders, both internally and externally, to make sure that we have a policy that is first and foremost about the preservation of life. The preservation of life of those that may be in a unit or home when a search warrant is conducted, and the lives of officers that are stepping into these at times high-risk situations. We want to make sure that we minimize the amount of times that an officer and the general public get into some of these interactions that far too often have resulted in death. I want to start by giving a huge thank you to our interim Civil Rights Director, Alberta Gillespie. Her and her team with the Civil Rights Department have conducted a full review of the execution and application for no-knock/no-announce warrants over these last 6 months. And that analysis has ultimately gone into the policy that we will be providing to you today in the general direction, anyway, of it. I also want to thank DeRay McKesson and Katie Ryan from Campaign Zero. They have an extensive database that provides information about what jurisdictions from around this country have done with regard to warrant policies. I want to thank our interim chief, Amelia Huffman, who is supportive of this policy and who has helped get it in place. And we're going to be working over the next several weeks to roll out the clear legalities and the definitions that are going to be in the ultimate policy, and then ultimately get the training set up as well. But some of the most important conversations that we have had over this last month have been with the more than 100 community members and leaders, some of them representing larger constituencies. They have provided good feedback and input on the policy that you will see before you, and provided some really good direction as to where we need to go going forward. As with any directional sense of policy, there's not unanimity in terms of what people think. But we wanted to provide a policy, again, that has preservation of life at the forefront and makes some headway towards rebuilding trust between our department and the constituents that we are charged with protecting and serving. So here's where we landed. Today we are announcing a prohibition on both the application for and the execution of no-knock/no-announce search warrants. In other words, going forward, we will neither be applying for no-knock/no-announce search warrants. Again, these two phrases are used interchangeably. We will not be executing the no-knock/no-announce search warrants. That applies for instances when another jurisdiction has requested the search warrant and we would be executing. That applies to instances when we would be applying for the warrant and other jurisdictions would be executing. Just to state it again and very clearly, this is a prohibition on all no-knock/no-announce search warrants, both the application for and execution of. So with this prohibition formally established, there are four main areas of additional policy change that we wanted to see through. The first is a requisite waiting time on knock/announce search warrants, which will still be applied for and conducted. On knock/announce search warrants going forward, there will be a requisite wait time of at least 20 seconds prior to entry. So officers executing a knock and announce warrant would have to knock/announce themselves, continue to announce themselves for a period of at least 20 seconds. It could be longer during the day. During the nighttime, which is established by state law as 8 p.m. to 7 a.m., we will require a minimum of 30 seconds. This is the most forward-thinking policy we believe in the country. And in addition to having this policy set up, as I mentioned earlier, our interim director of civil rights has undergone an analysis. We also want to make that analysis public as well today, and she's going to give you more of a rundown as to how that's going to function shortly here. We've also established a new system of classifying types of entry warrants and some additional layers of approvals for them. Search warrants, the knock and announce type, will still be conducted. However, they will now be divided into three key areas. The first is low risk. There'll be a medium risk and a high risk. Low-risk search warrants would happen in instances when an entry might not even be necessary, and certainly a forced entry is likely not necessary, and the expectation of any violence is minimal, if not zero. These are most classically done through a blood draw or a DNA sample. You might also see it in a search warrant for checking emails or Facebook messages, that kind of thing. That is a lower level entry or risk factor, and could be conducted by officers in general. The second is a medium risk warrant. And those will take place when a forced entry is possible, but even in instances of a forced entry, it is unlikely that the officer will encounter significant danger or firearms, etc. And that could be conducted by regular officers, could also be conducted by individuals with higher training like SWAT. That medium risk will require approval by a commander or above. And then high risk. Under the high risk scenario, it requires either approval of the chief or the chief's designee, being deputy chief or above. Under those scenarios, it will be exclusively conducted or executed by officers that have some higher degree or level of training. Now, in actually carrying these out, in carrying these warrants out, we also wanted to change the methodology associated with it. So we are going to be setting up some safer tactics to entering. Now, what that would look like practically is after the requisite 20 seconds has been met, officers would be able to enter and then hold. So rather than have an active entry, which has been conducted at times in the past where officers continue to enter the premise, officers would then enter the room or the unit. They would then hold. Now, in order to do that in a way that is safe, both for the occupants of the unit or the home as well as the officers, and conduct what is called a call out, where you are calling individuals out from the home or the unit, there would be some additional resources and enhanced technology that will ultimately be necessary. For instance, the officer that first enters and then holds would have to have likely 80-pound ballistics shield that would protect them and others from any danger that could be associated with entering the unit. Another officer would have to hang what is known as a ballistics blanket, or in some cases, officers will have to hang multiple ballistic blankets. Needless to say, having these additional responsibilities will also require additional personnel to conduct each one of these entries. And again, the goal here is safety. We want to make sure that everybody is safe and we're able to call out individuals from the unit without these active entries as much as possible. Finally, we want some additional civilian review and accountability systems in place. We want to set up a dashboard. And that dashboard could, on a semi-regular basis, be updated to reflect the warrants that have been executed and the forced entries that have been executed, and perhaps some additional information like whether the warrant was conducted during the daytime or the nighttime, and that'll give the public some general information about what we are doing. Now, there are, as always, still limitations as to what we can put on that dashboard, accounting for the fact that much of this data is private, and we don't want to go, we certainly don't want to violate the law in being as transparent as possible. We also want to embed civilians within our police department to making sure that they have regular reviews of how these search warrants are conducted, making sure that they are executed and applied for under the law, and specifically the policy that we've set up through the Minneapolis Police Department. And so, again, there's 4 things that are associated with these search warrants, the knock and announce, to be clear, search warrants that will still be conducted. That's requiring the new wait times, number 1, 20 seconds during the day and 30 seconds during the night. That's a new system of classification, low, medium, and high, with additional approvals that are associated with each. That's the enhanced technology and the safer techniques for entry, which we went through, and then 4 is the civilian review and accountability systems in the dashboard that I just mentioned. So those are the 4 key areas. We can go through those just to make sure we simplified it as much as possible. And this is complex. No knock / no announce and knock / announce search warrant law under the state is very complex. And so we're trying to be as transparent with all of you as we possibly can in this new policy. And from here, I'll tell you, we're going to keep our foot on the gas. My office is working with the MPD to begin crafting the official policy. Again, today we're giving you the directions that we're going to go. In the coming 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be working with our legal team to make sure that the actual writing on the page reflects the directions that I am telling you all today. We will give you that policy, that final policy, as soon as it is done. to make sure that you're able to evaluate, and then we'll make sure that officers are trained in completely on the new methodology. And this is really an opportunity to be a leader nationwide on search warrant policy. We want to do this right. And the implementation of this new policy and the added layers of accountability are really critical steps towards rebuilding community trust and then ultimately moving our city forward to true systemic change and reform within our department, and we want to set a tone. And so with that, I first want to give a huge thank you again to our interim director, Alberta Gillespie, who has pulled together her team to make sure that she's got a full analysis of this particular policy and doing the work going forward to make sure that the policy is effectuated properly. I'll call up our interim director, Alberta Gillespie.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the mayor. My comments will be fairly brief because the mayor covered a lot of the things that I think are really important as we consider no-knock warrants. And so I am, as he said, currently the interim director for the Civil Rights Department here in Minneapolis. And the role that we have played in this has really been about the data. And so if you know anything about the Civil Rights Department, we have the Office of Police Conduct and Review. And that division has the ability to conduct special reviews. And we made the decision on February 4th that we would do that. And our primary purpose has been really reviewing the data to make sure that we could provide the mayor and our partners at Campaign Zero with information that would lead to a data-driven policy, a policy that basically would achieve what we want to achieve. And as the mayor said, the most important thing is for us to make sure that we are creating policies that will protect community and the police officers. So we did this detailed review of how effective are the no-knock warrant searches here in Minneapolis. And so we will release our preliminary report today. You'll see in detail what we covered. That's public information. The public will be able to see it and question us about it. But the information, I will say, really does support this policy that the mayor is recommending, this direction that we're following. And so we have been honored to be a part of this process that will make sure that we have policies in place here in Minneapolis that will protect the people, again, and protect police officers as well. And the mayor has been really receptive to receiving that information because we all want to have data-driven policies. And what's been great is our partners, Campaign Zero, who are going to come up next, have ensured us that the information that we provided is something that is not necessarily available in other states. So we're excited to be on the cutting edge of providing information and data that really does exceed what's done in other states. So without further ado, I'll bring up Campaign Zero, and they can talk a little bit more about that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Duran McKesson of Campaign Zero. Good to be here. Our role was two-part. One is that we wanted to help the mayor's team focus on a policy and develop a policy that both reduced contact between the police and citizens and also saved lives. Those were our two goals in terms of our involvement here. There are a couple things I want to highlight about the proposed policy. The first is that when we looked at policies all across the country, we worked with every single state that has actually restricted the use of no-knock raids. There have been 6 states and the DOJ directive that have restricted the use of no-knock raids. We've also looked at all search warrant laws all across the country. And what is powerful about this proposed policy is that the first thing is that every search warrant will require a waiting time, and that's actually an important thing. There is no other city where every search warrant requires a waiting time, right now at the city level. There are 2 states that have a 20-second waiting time for the police. It's in state law for the execution of all search warrants. That's Maryland and Maine. There is no state or city that has 30 seconds. So if the policy that is proposed today becomes the actual policy, Minneapolis will be the only place in the country with a 30-second wait time. You know, we understand this as the floor, not the ceiling. So we're excited to see people look at the policies after today and continue to push the mayor's team and continue to push the council as well. The second is when we look at the 30 to 60 second or the floor of 30 seconds for nighttime, there have been cities that have proposed that in the past but have not been able to get it across the finish line. So again, if Minneapolis actually turns that into policy, that will be the only city or state in the country with even a 30-second wait time or a wait time that is different for daytime and nighttime with a floor of 30 seconds, which is huge. You know, we think that most people cannot get from any part of their house to the door in 30 seconds, which is why that floor is important. The second is that, or the third, is that our review of the Minneapolis policy on the front end before we were engaged at all with the city was that this was a 5.5 out of our rubric, which is out of 15 points. The rubric is public, it's been public, it's at endallnoknocks.org. If this policy becomes, if the proposed policy becomes the actual policy, it will be 11 out of 15. Minneapolis will have done all that it could do at the city level. There's some remaining things like civil asset forfeiture that have to be done at the state level or are not under the sole purview of the mayor. But an 11 out of 15 would be the best policy in the country at the state or the city level. The best today is Maryland, which is a 9.5. Again, the ratings and the rubrics are public on the website. One of the final things is to encourage people to remember that today is the proposed policy, that we are excited to continue working with the council and the mayor's office to make sure that the proposals today become the actual language in the policy, and we're heartened by this. One of the final things, though, is that the data that will be released today is one of a kind. We have never seen a state or a city be able to produce warrant by warrant analysis of any warrant data. The best data that exists right now is from the state of Maryland, and the report there sunsetted in 2014. It'll come back soon, but there is no up-to-date data that we have at the state level or cities anywhere. I'm excited for you to see the analysis that'll be released. Cities across the country should replicate this. It should be live, it should be real time. There's no reason why other cities should not follow this model, so we can hold police accountable and so that citizens understand what's happening in community. And we are excited to see it come to fruition. I'll pass it over to Katie to close us out.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Ryan with Campaign Zero. I wanted to provide a little bit more additional context for how exactly we landed on the recommendations in the proposed policy. The first is that we lean really heavily on some academic research by Dr. Pete Kraska, professor at Eastern Kentucky University, who is also the nation's leading scholar on no-knock search warrants. We also examined the really robust set of data that was produced from the mayor's office, which again was a close examination of both unannounced entries, no-knock search warrants, and knock-and-announce search warrants that came out of the MPD. We took all of this information and we also conducted an analysis of the current state statutes for search warrants as well as the current MPD policy to see where there were gaps, where there were opportunities, and where certain holes need to be closed in order to ensure that we have the most robust search warrant policy possible. That's how we landed on the recommendations for the 20-second wait time. It's also, the data pointed to a really clear need to ensure that there are a lot of restrictions on the execution of nighttime search warrants. And the data also pointed to a really clear need to make sure that there was just much more transparency around search warrant data, and that that data would be made available to the public, both for oversight, review, analysis, and so that we can continue to make sure that the police department and all law enforcement are operating as close to the principles and policy as possible. We are really excited to continue this collaboration. We are really hopeful that we'll be able to get, again, this groundbreaking policy across the finish line, and are looking forward to seeing the model that Minneapolis sets for other cities to fall in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie and DeRay and Interim Director. And also a big thank you to Council Member Vitar, Chair of the Public Safety Committee at the City Council. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions you might have.
You talk about like a hostage type of situation where, you know, waiting 20 or 30 seconds could potentially endanger lives. Would that sort of thing be exempt?
So it's a good question, and to use DeRay's line, we really should ban the word ban. Because there are exceptions under very dangerous situations, like, for instance, a hostage situation that you just mentioned, where officers could enter without a search warrant at all. So to be clear, an officer could be walking or driving down the street, encounter something that it could be extremely dangerous, whether it's a severe domestic violence situation or a hostage situation, as you just mentioned. I'm sure there are a number of other instances as well where they will just need to enter the premise, yes, without knocking and not announcing. That continues to be an exception in every single jurisdiction, including in Minneapolis.
So that's a state law, that's not like an exception written into your proposed
The question was is if that's in state law rather than an exception written into our policy. The state law defines exigent circumstances. Our policy, we hope, will further curtail to make it so that things like the destruction of drugs or flushing drugs down the toilet is not an exigent circumstance that would allow for entry prior to the 20-second minimum.
So your policy goes further than the current moratorium, basically?
Correct, yes. So the current moratorium applies to specifically no-knock/no-announce search warrants. This policy would, in addition to prohibiting no-knock/no-announce search warrants, it would also require the 20-second wait time ahead. Now, again, there are exigent circumstances that could take place. We need to acknowledge that transparently, and part of this is it explains the complexity of these particular laws and explaining them. They are indeed very complex.
Mayor, could you talk about a time frame for this to be implemented? And you talked about the buy-in from the police department on this. The interim chief's not here. There's no one else from the police department here. Could you talk about your steps to sell this going forward?
Sure. So there was a question about the timeline as to getting this set up, as well as the additional steps that we need to be taking going forward, and the interim chief's position as well. So first, the interim chief is very supportive. She's been very helpful, as has her staff, in ultimately getting this policy set up. Is there unanimity around a requisite 20-second wait? Of course there's not. I've heard from people that wanted to see longer than 20 seconds during the day. I've heard from people that wanted shorter than 20 seconds or no wait time at all. And I think that is just a dynamic of wanting to see some urgency attached to our policy making, and simultaneously people have divergence of opinion, and that'll always be the case. As far as the timeline goes, we hope to have this, so this is the direction. What you have heard today is the direction that we are going to take this policy, period. That direction will be put in writing and crossed through legal, just to make sure that the policy and the verbiage that we ultimately have on the paper reflects the direction that I'm giving you today. We imagine that should take 2 or 3 weeks. Additionally, we want to work vigorously and urgently to get the training system set up, because there is a slight difference in the training. There is a significant difference in the training itself on these particular search warrants. No, much sooner than that. So the question was, we looking later this summer? No. I don't want to give you an exact date here, but we're looking at having the policy formalized within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're talking weeks, not months. The training then shortly thereafter. I can get you an update as to what that should take, but I think we can start moving on the training even before the full policy is set.
How did you arrive on 20 and 30 seconds?
So there are a number of different jurisdictions through the country that have implemented some time. As Mr. DeRay McKesson mentioned, there are 2 states that presently have a 20-second minimum requirement. Those are Maine and Maryland. And there were no other municipalities or states with a longer wait time. We felt strongly that we wanted some period of time, certainly during the day. We felt like we wanted a longer period of time during the night, simply because people need the ability to get their wherewithal. And the whole intent, the purpose here is to give people who are trying to comply, people who are trying to do the right thing, giving them the ability to, again, get their wherewithal, answer the call if possible, and to make sure that officers are then entering into a situation where an individual is well informed about who is entering the place. Additionally, I didn't mention this. Now, this was already an MPD practice, but we wanted to formalize it in writing. Officers will also be required to be in uniform and or have a clear designation that they are, in fact, police if for instance, they're wearing armor. It should just say police clearly.
There haven't been any no-knock/no-announce warrants executed since the moratorium, correct?
Correct.
So it's almost like you kind of have a small sample size already. It's a very short time. But since then, you kind of have like this policy in practice, essentially. Have you found that that's at all hampered the police department, or how have they responded to the moratorium? Are they still able to do their work?
So yeah, I would direct that. So the question was, has the moratorium in any way hampered the policy in the immediacy? I'll tell you, it has of course hampered things in the immediacy, but that does not mean at all in any way, shape, or form that it will hamper our ability to conduct search warrants once everything is up and moving. It's probably a question that's best asked to police themselves, and no, they're not in here presently.
Can you speak more to who was involved in the proposal process? Did it come across the work group that you convened to make recommendations on public safety?
Good question. So the question was, can I speak to who has been involved in the process of setting up this general policy direction? A ton of people. So first, we've briefed council members on the topic. Second, we've reached out to a number of different external partners, including Campaign Zero and DeRay McKesson and Katie Ryan, as well as St. Thomas University. We've talked with a number of different law enforcement entities as well. Internally, we've talked with our MPD, discussed with a number of policy experts, and of course, our interim director of civil rights and her team have been running the analysis that also helped inform the policy itself. And finally, we've talked to over 100 people, many of whom are representing much larger entities, like, for instance, a portion of the American Indian community. We've had representatives, that would just be one example. That could offer feedback on the directional sense generally of the policy and where we need to go from here. Again, there has not been unanimity of perspective, and that's always going to be the case. Some ask for longer, some ask for shorter. But they all have helped ultimately inform the policy direction that you've seen before you.
And was this discussed by the public safety work group?
I'm sorry. Yes, it was. So the final question was it discussed by the public safety work group? Myself, as well as Mr. McKesson and Ms. Ryan, we presented to the public safety work group. Yes.
What will oversight look like once this policy goes into place? Will somebody be like reviewing body camera footage after each warrant's executed? Like, how will it be made sure that the police are following this process?
Yeah. So to make it, first off, to make it really easy for you, it's a prohibition on no knock / no announce warrants, both the execution of and the application for. But then in carrying out knock and announce, there are 4 key areas that you all want to focus on. I'm trying to make it easy for the news to set it up here. There's the required wait times, which we've discussed. There's the new system of classification, which would be low risk, medium risk, and high risk. There's the safer entry tactics, including the enhanced technology that we're going to be using. And then there's the civilian review internally at the MPD, as well as the additional accountability practices. So we will have, the plan is to have some civilians in the Minneapolis Police Department that are able to regularly review the footage of forced entries after they take place, and recommend and any changes that need to be made based on either the training or even potentially the policy. And additionally, we will continue to have a complaint-based system that's set up through our Office of Police Conduct Review in the Department of Civil Rights. That'll continue to be there. And of course, audit. So and the dashboard, finally. We are also setting up a dashboard to make sure that people can transparently see what we've done.
Does this designate a certain officer to make the announcement of police and search warrant? Because in that video where they entered the apartment where Mayor Locke was staying, they were all yelling police and search warrant, not simultaneously. And particularly if you're somebody who's half asleep, you might not realize what they're saying. Is there any designated way to communicate what's happening?
So the question was any designated way to communicate what exactly is happening in terms of the announcement prior to entry. That's going to be something that we're going to work through as a practice and in the training. I think you're right to ask about what is the best way of doing it, and I'm not an expert in the best way, particularly to announce, and we're going to make sure that that's involved in the practice and training going forward.
We got time for one more.
You had talked about the ballistic language the shield as they go in. Is that going into your decision making? Was there concern for officer safety waiting outside for this 20, 30 seconds, even in high risk situations?
So the question was whether there's a concern for officer safety in waiting outside for those requisite 20 seconds prior to entry. The answer is, of course, that was a concern, and that went into the methodology and the policy that we want to set up. I mean, Look, I have a lot of respect for police officers that are willing to go into these very dangerous situations. We need to make sure that they're protected, that they can get home to their families, and the goal of this policy was not just to make sure that people within the respective unit felt safer and are safer. We also want to make police officers safer. And so part of that is, yes, making sure that they have the necessary safety tools, whether that's the ballistic shield or the ballistic blanket, set up, they know how to use them, and that they are safe as well. So absolutely, that was a concern, and that was part of why we've set up this policy the way we have.
Real briefly, can you comment on the appeals court decision today? The appeals court decision today about police staffing?
Oh, you know, so the question was about the appeals court today with appeals court decision with regard to staffing, which is my understanding they reversed. I have not read the decision yet. I just briefly heard about it, but what I'll tell you, it doesn't impact anything that we are doing as far as pushing for additional officers and accounting for some of the attrition that we've seen over these last 2 years. So no, our strategy remains the same regardless.
All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.